Welcome to Inside Criminal Minds. If you're new here, please watch my previous videos, the link is in the description. However, if you've been here for a while, sit back, relax, and enjoy as we catch a kidnapper. This episode starts with the victim and her boyfriend leaving a party when they almost crash into a truck and, stupidly, try to investigate what went wrong. Unfortunately for the boyfriend, this was a fatal mistake, and meanwhile, at the FBI HQ, Morgan and Reed banter about girls, and it seems Reed did not have a good time at the Redskins game with JJ. It really strengthens the friendship between Morgan and Reed. Next, we see Agent Hotchner on his phone with his pregnant wife, and as their conversation ends, Haley, Hotchner's wife, says, "I love you," and Hotch just says, "Bye." Spoiler alert, this foreshadows a future altercation where Haley leaves Hotchner in a future episode due to the fact that Hotchner is more in love with the job than he is with Haley. Then we get a scene where everybody goes to the round table office and inspect the letters that the victim wrote herself, comparing the handwriting that makes no sense, because if you look at it, you can see clearly that it's definitely her handwriting. It doesn't even look like somebody's trying to forge that handwriting. Anyway, now that they're on the plane, they explain the father of the victim as a powerful lawyer with frequent death threats, increasing the suspect pool, and they also discuss the fact that the victim, Patricia, has a twin sister named Cheryl. They sweep the house for bugs and pre-vetted everyone in the father's staff, which leads me to one of my favorite scenes in this episode, and you'll have to wait to the end to find out why. And when the BAU make it to the house, we have Spencer Reed trying to comfort the father by stating stats on kidnapping and ransoms. They bring up the letters again, and throughout the episode, they keep wanting to go back to the father's staff. Next, we see Agent Morgan and Elle appear on the initial crime scene and find Cheryl basically trying to feel her sister's aura, and Morgan tries to dissect the crime scene by pretending to be the unsub. Next, we get a pretty funny scene about Spencer Reed and the father.
Insisted on it. The protective detail rankled when they hit puberty, and I was sure that they would refuse their bodyguards when they left for college. Excuse me, can you actually read that fast?
Our conscious minds can process 16 bits of information per second. Our unconscious, however, can process 11 million. Yes, I can actually read this fast.
In this episode, they have other FBI agents other than the BAU, one of them being Agent Schreier, which near the time of the call, he leaves, which is interesting. Anyways, we get a funny scene with Reed and Morgan.
Physiological pain.
And you believe it?
No, I'm just saying it's possible. I don't know everything. I mean, despite the fact that you think that I do.
I never said that. When have I ever said that?
Every day since I met you.
This morning at breakfast.
Yesterday when he beat you at cards.
Right before the call of the unsub, and at first the father starts talking to the unsub. However, the unsub pulls a 180 and demands to hear Cheryl, and the BAU tries to pull a fast one and use Elle to no avail. They finally get Cheryl on the phone to talk to the unsub, and it starts a cat and mouse game with him. Elle also does a very good job of prepping Cheryl how to talk to him. And during the phone call, we find out that Patricia isn't blindfolded, which means she basically has a death sentence even if the unsub gets the money. And even though Garcia isn't in the episode, they cannot trace the phone because it's a burner phone, and also she is sedated, which makes sense because in the first scene the unsub used a pickup truck. It would be very difficult to kidnap somebody in a truck due to the cab being so big and also the cabin of the truck being so small. And also, speaking of the first scene, why didn't they run ballistics on the weapon that killed the boyfriend? Just doesn't make any sense why they wouldn't try that first. And we get a really good scene with Elle and Cheryl talking about why she joined the FBI, because she wanted to catch bad men so they couldn't continue doing evil things. After the first conversation, the unsub decides that he wants Cheryl to be basically the linchpin for the money drop, but the BAU follows Cheryl against the unsub's demands, and they figure out, using the vagueness of the ransom demands, that this isn't a drop, this is a second kidnapping. Of course, just in time to scare off the unsub and get Cheryl back in one piece. Next, the unsub reveals that he wants to acquire both of the twins for his fantasy to become complete, and it turns out the boyfriend was going to be the fiance, providing the unsub with a stressor, or the reason the unsub acts out of character, like a divorce or losing their job. It puts the unsub in a no-win situation, forcing them to act. The BAU applies pressure by repeatedly hanging up the phone and trying to tell the unsub that it's the wrong number, and it's a great scene with Gideon using the unsub psychology against him, but the family fears for Patricia's life, and not for nothing, I would have freaked out as well if the FBI was antagonizing someone who had a member of my family. After that, Gideon tries to explain to the father why he did what he did, and this scene is why Gideon is one of the best profilers on the team. Next, we get a scene where the unsub profiles the team, but gets a lot of it wrong, like the fact that Reed is autistic and Morgan is just a beefcake. This prompts the team to take Cheryl to a safe house, which makes sense to move them away from the house, which most likely this unsub understands. But remember that first scene, my favorite scene in the episode, when they sweep the house and found no bugs? Well, in that scene, they bring the FBI's listening devices, and with it, a bug, and also Agent Schreier, who has been missing every single time that the unsub has been calling, reveals that Agent Schreier is actually the unsub. And also going back to the first scene that they got the unsub's call, he was actually late, most likely because he hadn't actually gotten back to his location with Patricia. And unfortunately for the team, Agent Schreier was at the safe house, but fortunately Elle figures it out before something bad happens. That's when Derek gets hit with a taser and Elle has to take on the unsub single-handedly, and she does a really good job of interrogating him to figure out where Patricia is located, and that Patricia was safe at the house, but she had to go to the hospital. This episode ends with Morgan and Elle finishing up paperwork and Elle volunteering to help Morgan. This episode showed a different style of profiling, a more forceful style, because they were in constant communication with the unsub, whereas in other episodes they don't have that kind of communication directly with the unsub. It's harder for them to profile him, and in this episode the suspense is definitely there, especially with the earlier Gideon scene, but I honestly don't understand why in this episode they didn't use actual twins. They used one actress and they almost never show them together. Also, it shows Gideon's love, care for victims, especially those who are still alive, and Elle got another smaller trauma while figuring out the unsub, but she's also becoming more confident in the BAU by bringing up her own theories, her own thoughts. She's really getting into the role of being a profiler. And also in this episode, you get the rare unsub that is part of the police department or the FBI. You don't really see it that often, especially in this series. That's it for this week. Tune in next week as we profile a killer who uses a sniper rifle to prey on his victims. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe.